Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. All right, John Middlekauff, your buddy and mine, former NFL scout, is about to stop by. But before we start with John, I want you to grab your smartphone. You know the drill. Download the Game Time app. So Game Time has a new feature. It's called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. So Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats. So you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account. The code is Colin, $20 off your first purchase, COLIN, $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So one of the things, John, that really jumped out to me, and I said this to start my rant, is that unlike the NFL, these are young kids, practice limitations, no preseason. I would be completely okay to watch a sloppy first half. I thought USC, 6 penalties, great situational football in the red zone, very good 2-minute drives, handled timeouts well, no turnovers. Again, very few penalties, 2 freshmen on the offensive line, no real breakdowns, alignments were great. I thought USC more than anything. I thought they looked tight, really buttoned up. John, the whole offense is freshmen and sophomores. I thought they looked great.
Colin, you get to take a victory lap for the next 7 days. Loud and clear. Pound that table. To me, 2 things really stood out. First and foremost, the size of the defenders. I would say over the last decade, they felt small. They've had a guy or 2 here on defense, but for the most part, they've had too many guys that look like me. You know, in the Pete Carroll heyday and all these SEC teams, the visual they showed of the transformation of the body types during the game, I mean, guys going from 230 to 260 in an offseason was evident because the LSU team they got a top 15 tackle. They got another guy who's pretty raw, who's going to go in the top 30. The wide receiver, the number 2, looks like an NFL guy. I mean, they had NFL guys everywhere. USC tackled. Physically, they didn't get shoved around. And I think what really changed is the last 2 years with Caleb, and rightfully so, they rode him like he was Steph Curry or LeBron James. Yeah. It was kind of like an individual, not a team. And it worked 2 years ago. Last year, it backfired because the defense was so terrible. Didn't they feel like a team? Didn't they just feel like a group of guys? There wasn't one necessary. I mean, everyone was making plays. They felt like a total unit. And listen, you were hammering this. I didn't believe Miller Moss clearly is pretty good. He's definitely tough. And Lincoln had the boys ready. And they could have folded there in the second half. And it was LSU that folded. And that's why Brian Kelly kind of snapped after the game.
Yeah, no, I think one of the things I had heard inside the program, and they really were in awe of Caleb as a guy and as a player. He was their Superman. And as they were rebuilding this program, they didn't have the right defensive staff. They didn't have enough big bodies. They had to ride him. But inside the program, I kept hearing this is a really unified team. There is no great individual. It's a much more complete roster.
For sure.
It's a deeper roster with more B2B plus players. In fact, I think their secondary is actually really good. They got length and transfers, and this is the best secondary they've had in a long time. They have different body types. The Mississippi State corner is 6'3", 200. Jalen Smith, who's a corner, is a smaller guy. He'll be a nickel in the NFL. I know that a couple NFL GMs text me. They're big fans of Jalen Smith and Monheim, the center. But I think this feels like it's not as quarterback centric, and that's not
Agreed.
A knock on Miller Moss. But this is something I kept hearing from USC, which is, hey, listen, you get one Caleb Williams, even at USC, you may get one of those in 25 years. Stanford's had great quarterbacks. You get one Elway. Right? Pitt got one Marino. They've had quarterbacks. Miami, as great as Miami was, Michael Irvin, Warren Sapp, you're not getting a lot of those guys at big programs. And so Herschel Walker at Georgia. So I tend to think that they knew they had something special, but they felt the roster was better and the staff was better. And I think they sold that to the players, that it was a more cohesive group. And it wasn't a knock at Caleb. They really loved Caleb Williams. Let's be honest. They won 11 games that first year, and it was a garbage roster.
They were good that year because of him and at Jordan Addison. You know, one thing in football that's so much different than obviously basketball and definitely baseball is when you add, we talk so much about the head coach. I mean, those two guys are making a combined over $200 million. But when you add the right coordinator at a spot where you're struggling and you get it right, it's like adding 3 or 4 players, isn't it? I mean, D'Anton Lynn, he basically came up, you know, he coached for the Ravens, so there's a toughness culture. What he did last year at UCLA, I know a lot of people around the country aren't locked in on UCLA football. They were really good on defense. And that group, I mean, this guy, if they win 9-10 games and their defense looks really good all season long, is he not just a lock? College head coach, and I would imagine a ton of NFL teams would hire him immediately. The lineage, his dad's a really good coach. That was really, really impressive because you and I have watched way too many snaps of USC. They can't tackle, Colin, forever, for years. I mean, this is going back post Pete Carroll. They look like a Mountain West team on defense, and last night, open field tackles, the physics. How many times last night did they hit someone and the guy went backwards? It's like, when's the last time this happened?
Yeah, Ramsey, the safety came up and knocked a running back backwards. NFL Week 1 is here, and a new season means new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. So fans have spoken. They want to bet on touchdowns. DraftKings heard us. They're delivering. DraftKings Sportsbook's the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like picking a player to score a touchdown. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? New DraftKings customers bet just $5 to get $250 in bonus bets instantly, plus 1 month of NFL Plus premium on us. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Real easy, 90 seconds. Use the code Colin. For new customers, will get you $250 in bonus bets, betting just $5. And 1 month of NFL Plus premium on us. Offer ends September 19th. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Yeah, and so by the way, when they I was talking to Jen Cohen, the athletic director, when they were trying to get D'Anton Lynn, and I called and I said, hey, where's your progress on your defensive coordinator? And she says, well, I'm not going to tell you who it is, but she says we are in a dogfight and he could change the program defensively. They were incredibly high on him, and she had said, who we're pursuing, we've been watching for a year, and we got our fingers crossed here. We're doing everything we can. I mean, he was a Bruin. He's across town. That's tough. Yeah. There's a lot of politics in Los Angeles. So he's terrific and beloved in the program. But no, I think, you know, John, it wasn't that USC won. It was how they won. And it does matter. If you look at the history of USC, you can argue there's more great defensive players. I mean, we remember Bush and Leinart, but all 4 linebackers Pete Carroll had. Remember, it was Malaluga, it was Rivers, it was Clay Matthews. All 4 of their linebackers went pro. All of them. I mean, it was linebacker U with Penn State for years. And I just think I was following some people that cover USC, and aesthetically, it mattered. It wasn't just, hey, if they don't won 38-31 and the defense was a slight upgrade, you wouldn't feel good about this.
My take is in the second half, when it looked like they might lose the game, I was like, listen, I was wrong on this team. They're definitely more like an 8-win team. And then they win the game, and you look at their schedule and you go, well, Michigan's quarterback, I was locked into that game because they were playing the Bulldogs. Their quarterback situation, dramatic drop-off from J.J. McCarthy. Notre Dame, I mean, that kid is a great physical runner, not a passer. The Big Ten, the middle of the Big Ten, I watch way too much of them. Minnesota's not that great. Wisconsin can't score. Michigan State's not great. Penn State, if that quarterback's better, they're going to be a problem. But USC doesn't play Ohio State this year, right? So it's Oregon. Like, is it crazy to say that if they have a really good defense, they could compete to win 10 games, and they're a playoff team? And the other thing is, and I said this last night in the reaction, that if they both go 9-3, because LSU is probably not as bad as everyone's overreacting. They have so much talent. Well, if that's between the 11th or 12th spot, like there's only one spot and they're both 9-3, USC beat them. I mean, that's right. That's a huge swing game, right? If they end up with the same record.
Yeah, and LSU does not face Georgia and gets Bama at home in the next 4 weeks.
And LSU's schedule is not very good. I
No.
mean, they're going to win 9.
So the Big Ten went 17-1. And this is something I thought about. Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC, especially Texas, and the way they can recruit that state, it makes it a better conference. But adding Washington, Oregon, and USC to the Big Ten is not a slight upgrade. I could argue that after Ohio State, now that Harbaugh's gone, after Ohio State, if I said the next 5 years, the second, third, fourth, and fifth best teams in the Big Ten were Oregon, USC, Michigan, Washington, like, I don't think it's crazy to suggest that adding 3 of the best 4 programs in the conference, if Utah always counts, I think, in that foursome, but with the right coach, USC, Oregon, Washington, those are playoff teams. Every time Washington's had a good coach, Don James, Rick Neuheisel, Chris Peterson, Kalen DeBoer, they vie for a national championship. Yeah. So it's like, I don't think people understand. It's Texas, Oklahoma make the SEC thicker. You added 3 on any given year, top 12 programs to the Big Ten. May it be a better overall conference now?
I think over the course of time, I think this year there's going to be a lot of reaction to the SEC. Their quarterback play, Colin. I mean, I'm going to give Oregon a little bit of a pass. I mean, that game was really weird. They played Boise. They played Boise this week. They better kick their ass and kind of get after it, because that was bizarre. The quarterback play, I didn't know that much about him. I'm sure you heard his name, the Nico kid from Los Angeles. That's Tennessee's quarterback. I got news for you. That guy's pretty special. Jackson Dart, Ole Miss, they're pretty good. Obviously, the 2 quarterbacks, the quarterback, Dylan Gabriel's at Oregon, because they told him, you're not going to start. Jackson Arnold's going to start. He's pretty good too. Their high-end teams with their quarterbacks are obviously Carson Beck and Georgia. Yeah. Over the course of time, I think, USC's only going to get better if they keep looking like this over the next 2 or 3 years. Yeah. Oregon's not going anywhere. But I got a lot of question marks about Wisconsin, about Minnesota, like the 4, 5, 6, 7 group of their teams. Penn State, you feel pretty good. Penn State could be a major problem. I was texting scouts all weekend long. I mean, their front seven's full of NFL guys. And if that quarterback takes a big step, that game got delayed for 25 hours. But they could be a serious factor. I mean, a serious factor.
I think
so. I think the high end of the Big Ten and the SEC, it's pretty clear that though Miami, I would still kind of red flag the quarterback can be up and down, but they're pretty talented.
Yeah, Cam Ward. I watched a lot of Cam Ward at Washington State. Cam's a lot of fun. I don't know if he's an NFL guy, but he's a lot of fun. He kind of just slings it. It's got an almost 7-on-7 feel to it. He's slinging stuff. And they just have been so inconsistent at quarterback. I think he's a playmaker, so I think he makes them interest. I think they can beat almost anybody and lose to a lot of teams. I still don't love Mario Cristobal as a situational coach. He's got a little Dan Campbell. I like the physicality. I like the culture. I don't know if I love the game management much.
He can recruit. One thing that really jumped out to me, and I'm sure you would agree, is did you see the ratings on some of the games on Saturday?
Just going to bring it up.
And I talked about this last night, the synergy of the NFL, the draft, and college football. It's all under this umbrella now, right? Yeah. So when you're watching, you're like, wait, who's this quarterback? Yeah, he might be a first rounder. Colorado and North Dakota State doing 5 million people on Thursday night. And one thing I think, and listen, they've never had a czar or a commissioner. The NCAA is a laughingstock to everyone at every individual program. No, we need to play real games. I have no problem like Michigan playing Fresno State or Oregon playing Boise State or some of those teams in the South, like the one Dilford's at. Like those are Power 5 or non-Power 5, whatever they consider it, but they're Division I. You should not be allowed to play and I got a lot of respect for the Montanas and stuff. You should get one of those games, and then everyone else in non-conference should be a Power 5 program because the more and more TV has power because they're cutting the bills. We got to wipe that out because how good that felt like an NFL light game last night. The physicality in Notre Dame and A&M. A&M's quarterback's got some serious issues, but the hitting in that game, it felt like how many NFL guys are on this field? And then you go to some of these other games, and I understand like Ole Miss, they've been recruiting or scheduling these games forever. They're a joke. I mean, Missouri, Ole Miss, some of these teams are beating teams 60-0. Like, what are we doing? And then they get mad fans don't show up. Play real games, play real teams, and everyone is zoned in.
Well, I'm glad you brought this up because the ratings were spectacular this weekend. And people could say, well, there's nothing else on. Yeah, there was. WNBA is getting big ratings with Caitlin Clark. Major League Baseball races. Don't tell me nothing was on. There was plenty of on. Plus, it's the summer. People aren't watching TV, right?
People
It's Labor
outside.
Day.
Yeah.
And it's Scotty Scheffler's golfing. There was plenty on TV. It got ratings because I think, John, it's almost like, have you ever been asked to go to a party and you're like, well, who's going to the party? And it's like, oh, there's two couples. Yeah, let's go to the party. It'd be a fun party.
Yeah.
I think college football got so regional and so southern that I saw some research on this about a month ago, that the Northeast and the West didn't feel included. And those are population centers, and they just didn't watch. And now with a 12-team playoff, you're like, it's a party. You're asking, well, who's in the party? And you're like, well, there's going to be 12 teams in the party. I think when USC was rolling, LA was getting ratings. The West Coast was getting ratings. They felt represented.
Big
And
time.
when Notre Dame and Penn State are good, then the Northeast feels represented. But when it's LSU and Georgia, Southern guys like college football is great. It's not. It's regional. It's tribal. I stopped talking about it on my radio show.
Well, it's four programs. It was Bama, Clemson, Georgia, Florida State,
Ohio State.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is it's now a party that everybody, like, if you're a Notre Dame fan, you're like, we can lose 2 games and get into the party. USC's like, if USC beats Michigan, you look at that schedule, they can lose to Penn State or Notre Dame. They're getting into the party. And I think it's just a part. It feels like finally all these years of this nonsensical scheduling where SEC teams are playing Citadel 4 times.
Yeah.
It feels like now I'm willing to emotionally engage on Labor Day weekend because there'll be a payoff at the party later, a more equitable, reasonable payoff with more people included.
I've always thought, and my thing was with the SEC, is that Nick Saban was almost a Tiger Woods, Steph Curry like figure. Even if you didn't, you could live in California or live in Washington or live in the Northeast, you kind of paid attention. You might not watch the games, but he was just such a big figure.
Yeah.
And his presence forced all these other programs and the money he brought in. Then it forced the Oregons, the Ohio States, the Michigans, really Florida State, Clemson to up their game. And it's benefited everybody. And I think you really see that with, Colin, how many Southern California kids are playing all over the country? When I was in high school in the early 2000s, there were the occasional Tom Brady to Michigan or DJ Williams went to Miami. But for the most part, you went to USC, UCLA, probably Oregon or Washington, right? It was very rare to, and now the overlap of the recruiting is like, oh, I can relate to this guy. All these teams are good. It's just really, and I think I'm more likely to watch the SEC now because they have Southern California guys or CJ Stroud. It's like, oh, he's LA kid starting quarterback for Ohio State. I'm in. And I think the world is so flat now in college football. The other thing is with the transfer portal. Yeah. I watch this quarterback at my team. If I'm an Oklahoma fan, what's Dylan Gabriel doing in Oklahoma? It's really added. Think if you're a Washington State guy, you're keeping an eye on Miami. There have been so many just factors of the streamline. It's so connected now to the NFL. It's what college basketball used to be in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, right? It felt like 1A and 1B. And now college football is like that. You feel like you're watching the minor leagues, but it feels big leagues because how cool are these games, right? Because of the ambiance and the vibe of the stadium. How awesome. I think one of the best things to happen in football was the Raiders going to Vegas because it created the stadium, and now they have all these huge events there.
It's great.
It was awesome.
So good. It was so good. Okay, let's pivot to the NFL. I had said this, is that we all know this, that there's 7 new playoff teams every year, and there's always a good team that pulls back. And I think there's an argument to be made that San Francisco's concerning. Trent Williams said this week, I'm unhappy. They don't win without Trent Williams and McCaffrey playing. So Trent's out. McCaffrey's coming on back-to-back years where he carried the ball, touched the ball 400 times. You look at his history. When he does that, those heavy use years, the next year, Christian gets hurt. Trent Williams, Aiyuk just signed. Still not sure he's happy. Ricky Pearsall gets shot. Thank God he's okay. And I think the Rams are a Super Bowl team. I think they're in the Super Bowl bubble. I think Arizona played their ass off last year at the end and is competitive. And I also think Seattle's a total wild card. I think my take is, and this is no shot at Pete Carroll, I think they kind of underachieved the last 2 years. I like their draft picks. I like their players. I'm sitting there thinking to myself, is New York, are the Jets going to walk in to Santa Clara and kick this team in the head? Are they in trouble?
Well, all we ever did was talk about Aiyuk, and he wasn't the most important player not signed, right? Or having a contract issue. That's Trent Williams. And every day that goes by, if he doesn't play against the Jets, that's a major problem. Who knows what the Jets are going to look like, but we know they got a lot of players up front. And I would imagine Hassan Reddick has 15 million reasons to show up this week, so that they got pass rush. The Ricky Pearsall thing, I don't see how that doesn't rattle. I mean, John Lynch at the hospital 2 nights ago or whatever. I mean, he easily could have died. How many people have you ever heard of that get shot in the chest and live?
Goes
Now,
through their body and they live.
It's by the grace of God he's alive, and I think his mom tweeted out something essentially saying that. Now, from a playing standpoint, he had been banged up. They weren't depending on him, so getting Brandon Aiyuk. I think people are overcorrecting a little bit on the Niners. McCaffrey said 3 weeks ago he would have played if they had real games. They're very careful with McCaffrey, Bosa, and Trent when he's around in these fall games. It comes if Purdy's playing well, they're going to be a problem because they still got Debo. The Kittle's healthy. If McCaffrey comes back, you got to have Trent in there because their offensive line isn't exactly loaded with first rounders. And defensively, Colin, I think they're going to be pretty good. I think their secondary is going to be awesome. Charvarius Ward is a high-end player. Lenore, this guy they drafted a couple years ago, has become really, really good. Their safety play. John Lynch might miss on some first rounders, but that guy knows safeties. I mean, they go about 4 deep of guys that will light you up. Fred Warner still, if not the best, him and Roquan, one of the best middle linebackers in the league. Their defensive line, when that gets rolling, they're always good. I think people are overcorrecting a little bit, but I'm with you. My thing goes back to Seattle is how often first-year coach, excellent defensive coordinator. It's a big transition, though. We've seen a lot of elite coordinators struggle in that spot. Not saying he will, but until he does it, we don't know. Their quarterback is still a guy that no one would pick in the top 15 if you were getting a draft.
That's right. That's right.
If you told me Dak Prescott was their quarterback or something, Cousins healthy, I'd be like, oh, shit. But the Niners have beat him like 5 straight times.
Yeah.
So you think McVay and Stafford are intimidated by him? Now, their talent, they get Byron. They get one of the best defenders in a draft. They're drafted in the middle of the first round. Yeah. So they are a huge wild card. Look at the 49ers schedule. If they beat the Jets, they're probably more likely to start 4-1 than struggle. So I'm not as down on the Niners, but it is not debatable. They had the craziest training camp of it. I mean, they had a player get shot. They have multiple holdouts of high-end Pro Bowlers and all pros. And health concerns, but I still like him against the Jets, Colin.
So I think the Tom Brady situation is fascinating. I had people asking me in the airport about this. I went golfing and I had a couple of people ask me about the story that he's going to be, he's trying to be a Raiders owner. And if you're a Raiders owner, there are limitations on what you can do in the NFL. And that had you
heard about that before, like in the halls?
No. And so, and it's one of those things that's above my pay grade. That's management. But, so for people that don't know, he can't criticize officials. He can't be in certain meetings, production meetings. I don't think the production meetings is a big deal. I think if you've been watching this stuff that Brady is allowing people to see the binders he has from every single season, everybody he ever faced, his preparation is, even compared to people who spend a lot of time preparing, is literally next level. And he just got off the field. I don't worry about any of that. The only part of it that concerns me, and it only may happen once every 2 weeks, 8 times a year, that you may have to call at the officials and go, that's a blown call. Now, replay helps reverse a lot of missed calls. So again, it's not the 70s, 80s. But when I read all the stuff, I thought, do you view it as credibility dinged if he can't rip officials? And I'm not saying rip, but be question officiating.
Listen, I like my announcers. I think once everyone started getting on Romo, Troy Aikman kind of got his swag back, and he'll light into somebody, and I like that. Yeah. Now, some people maybe like a more rosier glass, but here's the one thing. There's 20, 30 million people watching this game. When stuff's screwed up now in football, you have a pretty good idea. And people don't like to hear rose-colored glasses when stuff's pretty obvious. I thought it's not only officials. This isn't like certain things like with teams. To me, the restrictions that I read feel like, God, part of my big question mark with Tom, because I heard him on your show, he's awesome. I mean, his ability to speak about complicated stuff. But I was like, let his true personality come out, that he's known as the
Yes.
great teammate. Part of that is being one of the guys, obviously ribbing some people. I think that's pretty difficult. It will not be difficult for him to get the coaches and the players on the phone. Right? They will
That's
call
right.
him back.
That doesn't feel like a deal. That doesn't matter at all. That
Peyton
stuff.
talks about that sometimes on Monday night. Like I talked to Sean McVay on his drive home. They can go, him and Peyton can get anybody on the phone in the NFL in 5 minutes.
Right.
I do think him not being able to do that, if that's really serious, couldn't
Yeah.
you argue? And listen, I'm as pro capitalism as anybody, but this feels like it's going to be pretty tough if he one day actually, he's just never allowed to do that. It is pretty difficult to do your job if there are legit restrictions, because it's easy this year. But what about 5 years from now when you have some coaches you know nothing about? Those production meetings do hold some value, right? And that's one thing I'm not saying to like divest from the Raiders, because that's a pretty good investment investing in the NFL, but it feels pretty difficult. Fox is giving them almost $400 million.
Yeah. And again, I read all the restrictions. And listen, I'm a corporate opinionist. So essentially, I have strong opinions for companies, ESPN and Fox, that have rights with everybody. And my take has always been, I can say pretty much everything and anything, but I don't make it personal. I'm not going to go after Roger Goodell personally, or Adam Silver. Even now that we don't have the NBA, I try to be fair with people, even when I'm critical of people. Like for years, even with Baker Mayfield, I've said he is a top 20 quarterback. I think he's a great guy. He and Emily are wonderful people. I root for the guy. I thought he was immature when he came into the league. So I try to qualify stuff. I don't want to be a sledgehammer. I don't want to be an anvil, because I'm in these relationships too. I see these commissioners. I see these coaches. I don't want to be a jerk. I want to be somewhat respected as a generalist or an opinionist. But the one that did jump out to me was the officiating, because, and again, Tom's such a prep monster. I don't worry about the other stuff, but that one, I think what it would be, it wouldn't affect him, but it would mean a lot of bad press for him and Fox. And I think corporations don't like that.
My theory was, when I read the headline and kind of read, I think Florio wrote a long thing on it, was think how many owners over the last 20 years he's cost money. Playoff victories, knocked them out. Because this feels like pretty innocuous. What's he doing? Going to your practice and telling Antonio Pierce, who beat him in a Super Bowl, to steal some guy off a practice squad? Like, what is really going to happen? But I bet some owners, or maybe their VPs or people that know the true, because this feels pretty deep on the rule book for someone to dive, and word gets out, and they all kind of, a group of 3, 4, and then it just kind of grows. As not that they have anything against him personally, but from a competitive business standpoint, because the NFL is kind of unique that they're all independent entities worth billions of dollars, but they benefit as a unit. So sometimes they are, I would say, fractured, and sometimes because this doesn't gain steam without a group of several guys coming together and making a stink, right? I don't think Rodgers just saying, "Oh, you can't do this."
Right.
I think it's some owners, and think about, he's beat a lot of people in big games, that the difference, what were the Patriots worth 20 years ago before they started rattling off Super Bowls? They're worth a lot more now because of the history, all tied to Tom. And think the Colts might have 3 or 4 Super Bowls, the Ravens, the Steelers. I mean, there are a lot of teams that the difference of the marketing, the obviously what you make when you're a Super Bowl champion, getting to the Super Bowl, that just have an axe to grind. And we saw it forever with people going after Bill on some of this stuff.
How about Deflategate? That was the Colts.
Yeah.
I mean, Deflategate, the irony of Deflategate is Brady, after Deflategate, was a more efficient quarterback. His numbers went up once we knew. It's almost like Harbaugh at Michigan, once the Connor Stallions story came out, and now Harbaugh couldn't coach, and they played their toughest games of the year late when all the Connor Stallion stuff was out. They beat people worse. So it was like Deflategate and Harbaugh. We know Tom's great. We know Michigan was great, but let's be honest, Deflategate came from the Colts. Turn them in.
I think you could look at the Colts, the Jets with Mangini, right? With the Spygate. I think you could just go to their division. I can't imagine the Dolphins think that highly of Tom, him kicking their ass forever. The Bills, the AFC North teams, the Steelers, the Ravens. And this isn't like we're going to ruin your life. We have certain rules. This is really deep in the rule book and doesn't seem necessary, but screw you. We're going to make this a little more difficult on you. And It's like, okay, you want to join our country club? We're not just letting you right in, because remember, Mark Davis tried to almost let him buy in at a number not equal to the actual value. And the owner said, no, 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 no. If your team is valued as X, Tom needs to pay this, even for a tiny percentage. So they have made it, I would say, pretty difficult on Tom to get into this. What would you consider the NFL? One of the top 5 country clubs in America? I mean, it's got to be one of the most, might be the most difficult thing to get involved in currently.
Yeah, I mean, it's the #1 TV show on every network it's on. I mean, I always say this. Every business ever started in America is looking for marketing and has to pay a fortune for it. I mean, think about how much Stephen A. Smith, myself, Scott Van Pelt, Mike and Tony, Nick Wright, all these shows, how much free publicity the NFL gets.
Every day, 6 months.
Hundreds of millions of dollars on all of these talking shows, radio, TV, free. Every business looking for a free ad. So it's it's the best business.
Well, it's one of the great businesses to tail in the world we're in, right? I mean, we can make a lot of money just talking about football because of the amount of people that want to listen and watch. Obviously, they consume these games. That's back to Tom. You're right. It can get weird if he has to tiptoe about things that are pretty obvious.
Right.
And and maybe he won't care, but I think any human being on a new job, you don't want to start. It's a weird spot to be in. There's no debating that.
All right. Give me one team or one situation. I'll give you mine first, so I'll give you a couple seconds to think about it. One team that you don't know what the hell they're going to look like. And so I can't get my arms around Philadelphia. So I'm not in love with a coach. Take out Nick Sirianni, one guy. It's a different football team. Take out Nick Sirianni calling plays. Jalen Hurts a different quarterback. I think they've upgraded coordinators. Jason Kelsey's gone. They are a bit top heavy. I will say they've paid both receivers. I mean, they've got a lot of money at the high ends. I think there's heat on Sirianni. I think Philadelphia has proven they'll bail on a Super Bowl winning coach. They'll bail on Carson Wentz after they pay him. It's always been an intense, somewhat combustible city because of the relentless nature and the aggressive nature of the media and the fans. I love Philadelphia.
Yeah, I do too.
I don't know what I think because the division is still wonky. I like them. But if you told me they went 7-10 and Sirianni got fired the week after Thanksgiving, I wouldn't argue. What do I make of Philadelphia?
I have a hard time seeing them not being pretty good because of the talent they have. And I think the coordinator upgrades are massive. I think Fangio's been one of the better defensive coordinators. If he gets the 2 defensive linemen they drafted from Georgia playing well, they draft multiple corners. They still got Slay. I think the talent they have on offense, Kellen Moore's proven to be a pretty good offensive play caller. Nussmeier, LSU's quarterback, his dad's the quarterback coach. He coached Dak forever. I mean, they got real coach. Sirianni doesn't really. They kind of want him to stay away, but he's going to get all the heat. Think about these 2 games, Thursday and Friday. To me, there's a ton of pressure on the Ravens. Not because anyone's job's in jeopardy. But
Chiefs, Ravens, Thursday. Yeah.
Are you a real team? Can you hang with this team? Because this team, win or lose, they don't care. Like they don't see you in January. They're not worried about you. You need to prove it. To me, on Friday night, it's like the pressure's all on the Eagles. Because you lose a game, the Packers are good. But like you just said, the pressure, all the weird stuff with Sirianni, the relationship with him and the quarterback, they've paid a lot of money to Jalen. And they like Jalen, I think, more than Carson in terms of the guy. He's just an easier guy to deal with. He's focused, his football, the work ethic, the teammates. But part of it's production-based business. Like they're going to need, 30-plus touchdowns here. And the dynamic there, their division sucks. I'm not into Washington. I just don't think they're going to be – they don't have the talent. New York's the quarterback situation is just terrible. I don't think they got the talent either. And the Cowboys, I don't think are going to be the 12-win team. They're still, but them and the Eagles basically it feels like split most years. I think anything less than 10 and being in the playoffs, obviously Sirianni would get fired, but then it just gets weird. Like you just stick with Jalen because, like you said, that city moves quick. That city moves quick, and that's the thing with young quarterback. We just saw all these guys get drafted a couple years ago. 3 years later, they're all on different teams. These guys get huge contracts now because the NFL's making so much money. It's like, yeah, we already paid him his $70 million to get him out of here. We'll eat $20 million in dead cap. Russell Wilson. But it's not even just quarterbacks. It happens all sorts of players. So the pace in which everything happens has never been faster in the NFL. And you could argue no one operates faster in terms of pressure and urgency than the Eagles. So it's going to be fast. I don't know either. I wouldn't bet that game Friday night because who knows? Like if you tell me the Eagles come out firing, I'd believe you. If you tell me it's weird, the game's in Brazil. I mean, what are we doing? Does that make any sense to you? I'm pro expansion and pro growth.
No.
I text a couple people with the Eagles. I'm like, are you going? They're like, oh, thank God. I don't have to go. I'm doing something else. I was like, that's one of your Roger has been incredible. The league office over the internet age, the money they've made everybody, most of their ideas work. That to me is pretty idiotic. I mean, that's unnecessary, I would say.
Yeah, I feel like wasn't it a few years ago the Yankees opened in Japan or something, and they were
Baseball's been
about
doing
it.
that forever.
It's easy for like maybe the Mariners or the Giants, but no, I mean I like the games in Mexico City, which is an amazing city. I have friends that have been there. They're like, oh my God, you got to go in your life. Best food city, maybe in our region of the country. Um, and I like European games. I was just over in London. There are NFL. You'd be amazed. There are not just English Premier. There are NFL caps all over London. You'll see them.
Should have just gone there. To me, that field, if you are going to go, just go across the pond. Don't go to Brazil, where I saw A.J. Brown said, we went over the rules and they say no phones on the street. So he's like, yeah, I think I'm just going to stay in my hotel room. Like if that are the parameters, probably should cancel. My team, I thought about pretty strong picking this team over the summer to win the division. I'm not. I'm going to pick the Texans, but the Colts, who I think they're pretty good. And I love their coach. Watched Anthony Richardson a couple times in the preseason. Incredible talent. The ball flies all over the map, though.
Yeah.
So it's hard. Could they, if he's pretty good and stays healthy, win 10 games? For sure. But if he is just wildly inaccurate against good teams, you're going to lose a lot of those games. So it's like their margin from being, to me, they could be 7-8 or they could be 10-11. It all comes down to him. And obviously it's going to be rocky, but as the season goes, like what Shane did with Jalen, can he just get him under control? Jalen doesn't have, he throws with more touch because he doesn't throw as hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard for this guy to not throw like 100-mile-an-hour fastballs.
Oh, it's incredible.
When the guy's 7 feet away from him. So it's hard to play like that in the NFL if your team is not incredibly loaded. They're good, but I don't know if they can overcome some games where he's like 50% because the balls are all over the map.
John Middlekauff, 3 and Out podcast, former NFL scout, the first of about 20 some weeks in a row. We will generally do these on Sunday night. You know that, but I just got back for the record, John, I told my wife a couple years ago, I said, we're going to do a European trip at least once a year for the rest, probably the next 15 years. So we went to London for 4 or 5 days, and I don't care what anybody tells you. My wife is not a foodie, but her family's in the food business. She said, it's almost sacrilegious. She goes, I would take London food over Italy. And I said, just don't say it out loud. We were at everything from pubs, the hole in the walls, to high-end lunch places. Don't listen to anybody. London may not have good weather. That is a sensational, maybe it's not New York, but it is a sensational food city. And if you like architecture and parks, like I love to go on jogs or walks in like overcast days. I'm a Northwest kid.
Yeah.
God, London is spectacular. And they have their cab system, for anybody listening, is fascinating. It takes 3 to 4 years to get a cab license. They're called black cabs. Their cab system is a complete game changer for anybody that is not from the country and for those who live in the country. So the pound is stronger than the dollar. So 10 pounds is probably $11.50. But if you go to England and you go to London and you just First thing you do is you exchange or you take out, 10 pounds, $300 in tens. There's $10 or 10-pound cab rides all over. And taxi drivers in London make Uber and Lyft look like such ripoffs. There is no surge pricing. They are tour guides and cab drivers. You have to know it takes 4 to 5 years to be a cab driver or a taxi driver in England. You have to know every street in the city, every one. The testing
They take a test?
Oh, it's grueling. It's a multiple year to become qualification. Our taxi drivers in London, my wife and I were laughing. We're like zigzagging back ways to find like a weird nightclub at 11 at night that some concierge said, "Hey, go try this place. It's called Froggies." And we're thinking, okay, we couldn't find it in a week if it had dropped us off down the street. So if you go there, just know the transportation, you can take their version of a subway, that's fine. The transportation and the food, if you can get over overcast skies, is sensational in London. I love it.
So as a guy that has a large, pretty good sizable position in Uber, do they just not exist there? Do we have no presence? And then just the taxis? Well, they're going to school like they're medical. They're going to be doctors. I mean, how do you compete with that?
You can't compete with it. So I never used those services.
You didn't use Uber or Lyft when you were there?
No. My concierge at my hotel he said, we can get you a driver for 100 pounds an hour, which is probably about $120. I think the pound is stronger than the American dollar right now. So, or you could do a taxi. So my wife and I are, we'll just take taxis. We love it. And they're fascinating people. I mean, they've just got these British accents. They're just regular people, but these are careers. You buy that taxi, it is yours. These people are incredibly proud. They're tour guides. So if you're going to go over there, it is so wonderful. It really elevates the experience. They know the city like the back of its hand. It's, what it's like? It's like a bigger Chicago, with even greater architecture. So it's a bigger Chicago with roads are tighter, but the architecture is even more dramatic. And I think Chicago is a remarkable architecture city in North America. So it
was cold over there. Like you were wearing pants.
It was. I like cold weather. It wasn't, but it's not Spain, Greece. It's not Paris. You're not going to get the mugginess consistently. Humid, yeah. No, you get 70-degree days all the time.
What was your best meal?
I went to a place called At 22 and had a dinner with Ann it was like in a house that had residences. That was remarkable. I went to a place called 108 Brasserie and had a superfood salad with shrimp. And I told my wife 3 bites into it, this is the greatest salad I've ever eaten in my life. Now, the portions in London are not American portions.
Yeah.
They joke about it over there. They joke about, this is not Houston. You don't get a plate of brisket. It's not the way it works. But just the quality, they take it serious. Gordon Ramsay has a footprint all over the city. I mean, you can't turn a corner without a Gordon Ramsay restaurant, and he's helped elevate the culinary experience. But I just think if you and your wife, there's no language barriers, tradition, architecture, it's civility, and the pubs are freaking incredible. John, any part of town in London, you walk in a pub, you grab a beer, you're standing out in the street talking to a bloke about your favorite football team out in the street, in alleys. It's just the best.
Is it? It's kind of there in New York City, right? I mean, but it doesn't have that vibe of craziness 24/7.
Well, I would say I like London. Listen, Chicago's my favorite big city in the United States. I like LA, Chicago, Vancouver, BC. I don't love a lot of big cities. Boston's okay. I'm not really a Dallas, Atlanta, Houston. Just don't do a lot for me. I don't like to be in my car. I want to walk. Chicago, New York, I can walk. Vancouver, I can walk. London, you can walk everywhere.
That's nice.
Covent Garden, by the way, a bit of a tourist trap, too crowded for my taste, a little young. If you're young, go to Covent Garden, but not my scene. But I would say, compared to New York, New York's bigger. Um, I think London's easier to get around. Both have great parks. Central Park's, terrific. But I'm a London fan. I'm a London fan.
Did you hold your own BSing about soccer over some beers with random people in pubs, or was it pretty intense? Are they talking like SEC people? If you're in Alabama, you better know your shit.
No, you're not going to fool anybody. No 86-mile-an-hour fastballs get past anybody.
No, I can't imagine.
All right, bud.
Okay.
Great stuff.
Fight on.